Hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I am your host, John Harris, and on my right-hand side is my right-hand man, Gabriel.
We got a Gucci time. Gucci time.
It is a Gucci time. And that sample you just heard was What Went Wrong by the Wise Man's Fear. And wise men also have Gucci times. And I've got the Wise Man's Fear on the show with me right now. They've got a new album called Valley of Kings, such released via Sharp Tone Records on May 29th. And right now I'm being joined by Paul to share some stories about the music, share more info about the band. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, man.
Absolutely great to have you on. And I dig your setup. You look more prepared for this interview than I do.
Thank you, dude. Sharp Tone has been putting in the legwork and getting us interviews pretty frequently, so I've had to keep my room somewhat clean and presentable. Aside from the little TV in the back corner, we've been playing a lot of Call of Duty Warzone and getting three dudes in the room at the same time, all jamming on different TVs.
There we go. I was going to say, nothing sounds better than three dudes crammed into a room. I hope it's a sweaty room. A socially distanced cram.
Dude, it's like college all over again. My roommates and I just chilling, playing video games. It's a good life.
It is a good life. Beautiful. All right. Well, speaking of things that are going right, let's go listen back to that track, What Went Wrong.
What went wrong? Who wants a Gucci doll?
All right. Coming back from the track, What Went Wrong. And I don't know. I just dig it, Paul. I just dig it. Your cup is blue. The mic you've got is blue. The tint on the music video is blue. There's a lot of blue going on here.
We were feeling blue when we wrote it. It all, it's all symbolic.
Exactly.
It's all blue in the music video.
All blue, baby.
So true.
So true. And the funny thing is, I think, if I'm not wrong, my note is you guys are fantasy core.
Yes, sir. That is the sort of term that we have cut out to establish our sound. We got really tired of trying to explain to people, well, it's like melodic modern metalcore with fantastical sonic elements and lyrics that depict a story set in a made-up fantasy universe. It just became like way too much to tell somebody in 30 seconds if you were trying to describe the sound. So fantasy core, we do metalcore, and we do it fantasy style. So that's sort of how we landed on that.
Yeah. Because the thing is, the two tracks we're going to be chatting about today, I think, are quite different from each other. Or maybe you feel differently.
No, I'd agree with you for sure.
And I remember when I heard the first track, and I always wait for a second track before I have people come onto the show. When I heard the second track, I was like, whoa. It's like, whoa. It's a completely different band or something. What's going on here? But I definitely dig the way that this track just starts off, and I don't know. It just seems like a simmering angst that's about to boil over the minute the song starts. And it's like I came into the middle of a Quentin Tarantino scene, and I'm like, what is going to happen?
Dude, we got to get you to start writing our bios for stuff, our press releases. That's a simmering angst. I love it. Yeah, man. I mean, our vocalist, Tyler, sort of spearheaded that whole track. Like he wrote the guitars, he wrote the structure for the whole song, he wrote the vast majority of the lyrics. But yeah, it's kind of a fun band to write for in that. So when he wrote that song, he was writing it about a really turbulent time in his life a while back, because we started writing for this record a while ago. So there's that meaning to him. And then we'll also, once songs get written, we'll repurpose them and assign them sort of a slot in the story arc of the album. So it's every song kind of has this duality where there's a personal component, but then the side that's presented to people is a lot more conceptual and metaphorical, and it's being spoken through the voice of these characters. So it sort of creates that barrier of separation, which is a fun little poetic device to use.
Yeah. Okay, so take us through that. So there's a character in the track then? Or through the whole album? Or how does it work?
For sure. And actually on this record, there are 5 protagonists. It's sort of, we like to describe this record as if Lord of the Rings, if the Fellowship of the Ring and Journey to the Center of the Earth had a baby and dropped it through Alice in Wonderland's looking glass, like it would be something like this record. The 5 main characters, and they're each the greatest warriors in the land at the time. And they're setting out to destroy these 5 evil relics that are left over from our second record, The Lost City. And so the whole thing is this quest for them to find the Valley of Kings, which is the only way that they can destroy the relics. So it's sort of the trials and tribulations of the group. And each of them represents a philosophical worldview. So you've got nihilism, absurdism, monotheistic, or atheistic existentialism, theistic existentialism, and then the last character just represents a blank slate, so unaffected by a preset worldview. But yeah, they're all just making their way towards the middle of the earth, as one does, and it's sort of providing a commentary back and forth between the problem solving of different worldviews and how you can see the same events and filter them very differently depending on your predisposition.
Wow. And then when you go towards your doctorate in sociology, you could present this as your thesis work.
Oh, dude, if I ever go back to school, I feel like it'll be out of a midlife crisis or something. I'm so glad to be out.
True story. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, our poor bassist Thomas is going to school at Indiana University right now in Bloomington, and got sent home because the whole campus closed down as per the pandemic. And yeah, it's been a bummer for him. It's been like a rough transition. He's got to go live in my hometown, Kirkland, Indiana, for the next bit, at least till the fall semester at the soonest. And yeah, they've got about the slowest internet on the world, so I feel bad for him.
Not in Kirkland.
Not in Kirkland, yeah.
Not through the 421 and the 38.
Which is the perfect place to Gucci.
It's the perfect place to Gucci. It was founded in 1830, and I'm sure in 1830 in Indiana there was no philosophical viewpoints at that point in time.
Yeah.
Gucci?
On the road sign, it says, Kirkland, the perfect place to Gucci.
It does.
On the way into town.
The perfect place to Gucci. What went wrong? Nothing, man. But yeah, because of the whole, pandemic, I was thinking, okay, well, what if, I don't know, for some strange reason, I feel like I should go back to school. So I went to our university's website and started looking at master's and doctoral degree programs because I already have a bachelor's. And I was just looking at everything that they do, and I was like, these people are useless. Like,
don't tell them that. Don't let them know.
Exactly. Don't let the academics know that they have no purpose in life. Because oddly enough, just through this pandemic, and obviously work as a chef, because I used to be an engineer, and then that work dried up where I was at, so I went back into cooking. And I've become so useful that I look at people just pandering about with, academic terminology for something that isn't doing anything for anybody, and I'm like, wow. That used to seem so fun, but now I just want to be useful. Like, I just want to go grow a tomato so I can give it to somebody who doesn't have food and go, here you go, here's food.
It's kind of interesting to hear the perspective of an ex-engineer now finding more utility, being a chef, being something very practical. That's kind of a cool perspective. I feel like if someone's like, oh, what's the most practical career? They'd be like, oh, engineer, you make stuff, but it's all supply and demand, if people need food, bottom of the hierarchy of needs. So, that's where a lot of use comes from.
Mm-hmm. Exactamente. Now, if you know the track What Went Wrong, then you'll super de-duper love the Blue Tint music video that we had actually just chatted about in the beginning. I guess maybe just take us through the music video. It looks like a simple performance video, but take us through maybe some of the thematics of, like, for example, why is it blue? Because it's cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. Blue is a cool color. So the trajectory of the record places What Went Wrong sort of in the middle, and it's very literally like what went wrong with the Company of Five on their quest, and it's this sort of schism inflection point where some of the group members want to turn back and abandon the quest. The other ones want to stick to this like blood pact that they swore. So it's sort of like the group reflecting on itself, and but it's also the reason it's blue is there's it feels like a little bit cold and dark, and it's also the precursor to, or it comes right after the track The Cave, I believe. It's right next to The Cave on the record, and The Cave is where they actually start to enter the tunnel that's going to lead down to the center of the earth. So they're recently underground, and everything's got this like weird, fleety, shadowy feel. So that's what we were trying to replicate. We've got some red accent lights to kind of mirror, the track The Cave is based on Plato's analogy of the cave. So in that analogy, there, the shadows on the wall, and there's this fire in the middle, but it's like this really dark, depressing setting. So we're trying to sort of draw on some of that, but then package it into a performance music video that, provides some contrast to our first music video, The Relics of Nihlux, where there's a lot of dense storytelling going on. This one is a little more accessible to people who may be new to the band, but it's still, has a little bit of symbolism in there.
All right. I'm on a Wikipedia page right now looking at the allegory of the cave.
Oh, dude, it's fascinating. I went down this big old rabbit hole of watching people's YouTube analyses of that allegory, and super ahead of its time, I think. So it's something that we kind of like to pay homage to, especially because, like our band name itself is kind of like a Socratic stance on pride, and sort of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So it's like impossible to be wise and prideful at the same time is kind of what our name is derived from. But yeah, so there's like a lot of that Greek philosophy has kind of had an impact on how we move the characters in our storylines and things like that.
Paul, I have absolute pride in being wise. I don't understand.
Yeah. I am the wisest man I know, dude.
And most humble.
Exactly, yeah. What can't I do?
I hate when people forget that I'm humble.
I hate when I have to remind them about it,
All right, beautiful. Well, speaking of the Relics of Nihlux, let's go and listen to that track, The Relics of Nihlux.
The Relics of Nihlux, Relics, and a Gucci time.
All right, coming back from the track, The Relics of Nihlux. Now, true story, Paul, is that, being as wise as I am, I looked at my wife, who's really into Egyptian mythology and whatnot. Long before I read anything about this album, I got the email, from Sharp Tone, and it said the Relics, and I went of Nihlux, and then I saw the Valley of Kings, and I just looked at my wife and I said, "Woman, what? Who is Nihlux and what are his relics?" And she was like, "What? That's not real." And I was like, "What do you mean? The Valley of Kings is Egypt, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, so there's relics there, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "So what's Nihlux?" She's like, "Nothing. It's not real." So I'm like, "What?" So I took to the internet, and Paul, I cried.
Oh no, that was never our intent.
I met my fear that I maybe was not as wise as I thought.
Classic. Dang, man.
I know, and that's what went wrong. But on a more serious note, you mentioned that there are the 5. Do we want to call them personas or personages, or just rather protagonists? They've got different philosophical worldviews. And so I'm speculating that since you mentioned that one of those worldviews is nihilism, this is going to be something pertaining to nihilism because of the root word nihil?
A little bit, yeah. So it's a combination of that root word and then lux, which is Latin for light. So together it just creates anti-light, or the absence of light. And we were basically just trying to describe how, like, the evil nature of the relics and how they are, this like dark sorcery that's existed and been a thorn in the side of the land for 1,000 years. And actually our second record was sort of where we established a little bit of this, but there is this sort of arch-villain who's present throughout the trilogy, and he has these 5 generals, and each of them create a relic. And it's kind of alluded to in the album art of The Lost City, which is our second record, which is a lot more Egyptian inspired, ironically. But then, fast forward 1,000 years, and you've got people basically trying to get rid of the evil relics from way back when. But good eye on the Valley of Kings being a Luxor reference. That something about that ancient Egyptian mythos is just so fascinating to me. I could just read about it forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, going back to cooking and sorcery and witchcraft, bread is thought to have been invented by Egyptian witchcraft, which we now understand is just the most ludicrous propaganda you could come up with. But I guess that's the thing about propaganda, is that eventually time will erase propaganda or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's only ridiculous after the fact. Once it's been debunked.
Yeah, exactly. Oddly enough, you mentioned that these guys are creating relics, and I thought, can you create a relic, or do you just create something and it becomes a relic? And so I looked up the definition of relic, and it's an object surviving from an earlier time, especially one of historical or sentimental interest. And I could pick apart that for a long time, because if I found a grocery list from somebody from 1,000 years ago, I would find that to be of historical interest, personally. what I call
Maybe that's what this is. A bunch of grocery lists from these evil generals back in the War of Numa.
Exactly. Oh, no, not Numa dance. It's all coming back to me now.
We got the Gucci dance.
We got the Gucci dance, the Numa dance, and I just blew
We're an advanced society. We have the Gucci dance now.
We are.
The Gucci time.
People got to get down, man. They got to party. That's the wise man's fear.
So true. It's so true.
It is. Okay, fantastic. Now, take us through this music video, because if you dug the track, The Relics of Nihlux,
Whatever you want to say it.
Spandex, then you are
Gucci what?
Gucci Spanx, then what you are absolutely going to love is the music video, which is actually orange now. So we're going through the entire palette of colors. But I guess maybe take us through the symbolic reference that, number one, this song comes out of the gate swinging. I felt like I was attacked. I felt like people were coming at me for my soul. I shut the screen and I went Egyptian witchcraft, and I shut the screen. And
then bread.
Yeah, and then I burned all the bread in the house. I was a good Jew that day. And yeah, that's pretty much how that whole thing went. So take us through this music video.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, it is sort of warm colors, red, oranges, and yellows. And that is sort of to reflect the album art. This is kind of like the flagship song for that record. First track on the record really sets the tone, establishes the storyline. But then also, like the album art accent color is red. And together with the other two in the trilogy, it forms the red, green, blue triad. So it's sort of completing the trilogy in that way. So we wanted to keep that prevalent in this music video. But yeah, the sort of story substance of the music video is you were seeing these 5 warriors gather together and essentially sign a blood pact, swearing to destroy these relics. And the track is like really punchy, like you'd mentioned. So it's just representing they have a ton of resolve, and they're sort of feeling ready for anything. But then lyrically, it's describing a bit how they have ulterior motives, and some of them are in it for fortune and fame, and all the glory and whatnot. So it's kind of a foreboding track in a way, because it's hinting and foreshadowing at the fact that the group is going to eventually schism and turn on itself.
Wow. I mean,
a lot of story.
Yeah,
to pack.
And big words. There were multisyllabic phrases in that entire thing you had going on there. David Hall, actually, on YouTube says, "Why is the wise man's fear so underrated?"
I hope he was talking about the book, because that's especially true of the book.
You're like, because we are definitely not underrated. But thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David. We have a lot of pride in how wise we are, and we do not have that fear. Because it wouldn't be wise to have
and
fear.
We're Gucci.
And we're Gucci. Es Gucci, ma? I don't think that's how things go today. Beautiful. Now, if you dug the 2 tracks, What Went Wrong and The Relics of Nihlux, then you were going to be super excited that on May 29th via Sharp Tone Records came a full album called Valley of Kings, and you kind of mentioned that it's not what I thought it was, which is why I cried. Emotionally on the inside. I kept it inside. It's important to teach the children that men don't cry.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we got these 5 protagonists, and it's like if Lord of the Rings and Alice in Wonderland made a baby, which is quite an interesting scenario.
And the baby Gucci.
And the baby is Gucci. And they are on their way to the Valley of Kings to destroy relics, and they have 5 different worldviews. But I mean, I guess maybe run us through that. I don't know, maybe you should run us through it one more time. Maybe just take us through the fact that the 2 tracks that we listened to today are really quite different from each other. So what should we expect from the sonic landscape with regard to the album? And maybe a better question, Paul, is when you guys put together the body of work, what was the intention maybe musically? And I think we've gotten a really good idea lyrically of what you guys set out to do, but musically maybe, what did you guys set out to do?
Yeah, great question, man. For each record, we'll establish like a overarching concept first, and then sort of parallel to that, we're working on a bunch of instrumentals. And then, yeah, sonically, the record is informed sort of by the story, and that just means, so you have a track like Relics early on in the record correlating to the story material early in the record, but it's fun modeling a record after a story because you get this sort of natural trajectory and ebb and flow of energy. So As far as the decision to release the singles we did, we wanted to use the first one, Relics, to sort of reinforce that we haven't gone soft and we haven't, become a radio rock band like every metalcore band seemed to be trying to do for a little while there. And also to get some of those heavier story elements across. But then the second single we released to demonstrate a more melodic side and to sort of reinforce the dynamicism of the record and show that there is a trajectory. And it's fun sonically. We took like a lot of the fantasy elements from this record are ancient Celtic instruments, which was sort of a decision we made ahead of time because that sort of mysticism and that warrior culture we felt like aligned sort of with the story we were trying to tell. But it all has a play on, the energy of the songs, the ebb and flow of the record, which we try to view as a whole cohesive work rather than, strapping 11 songs onto the same disc and handing it out.
Yeah. I like the handing it out part. That tells me that you guys know what it's like to put in the footwork.
And Gucci.
Yeah.
And Gucci.
And the Gucci.
And the Gucci. All right. Perfect.
It's an undying Gucci interview.
It's probably the most Gucci interview Paul's ever had, and I don't mean to say that with a lick of or lack of.
That's absolutely true, man. We don't get a lot of Gucci as small tier metalcore artists.
Oh man, I think I've been known for my hubris from time to time, but groovy. All right. Normally this time of year we'd be chatting about tours, festivals, but that's canceled. So, is there any other news that you wanted to chat about that maybe I missed?
Not really. We're putting out actually a third music video and single tonight at midnight, right as the clock strikes May 29th. So that's going to be for Firefall, which is the 10th track on the record. And that one's just as heavy as they come for us. I think it might be the heaviest track we've done. Just super mean. But again, it's the storyline there it's the final showdown between the antagonist and the protagonist having a sword fight and just beating the crap out of each other. So it's, the heaviness is reinforcing the story and the story is reinforcing the heaviness there. But that's coming out tonight. Valley of Kings is out May 29th through Sharp Tone Records. And, when touring becomes possible again, we're going to try to make that happen.
Cool. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. It's been a pleasure.